It was night, not just the kind that blankets the sky, but the kind that presses into the soul. The Garden of Gethsemane lay still under the weight of something eternal. Olive trees stood like silent sentinels, their roots tangled in centuries of prayers and pain. The stars above didn't blink, they watched. And Jesus knelt. This was not the Jesus preaching to the crowds or calming the storm. This was not the Jesus multiplying loaves or walking on water. This was the Jesus who was human, and he was breaking. Alone while his friends fell asleep, just feet away, he faced the full gravity of what was coming. The cross was no longer a distant shadow. It was near, real, heavy. It pressed against his mind with every breath he prayed. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. The Son of God, the one who healed the sick and raised the dead, was asking for another way, and yet he ended with surrender. Yet not my will, but yours be done. This wasn't weakness, it was the deepest kind of strength, the kind that chooses obedience over ease. The kind that wrestles honestly with pain but does not run. The kind that sweats blood because the burden is so heavy, yet keeps kneeling anyway. In that garden, we see Jesus in his most vulnerable moment, not surrounded by angels, not transfigured in glory, but trembling, pleading, sweating blood, and yet choosing to stay because love kept him there. Not nails, not duty, love. This was the night Jesus felt what it meant to be crushed by sorrow, to look ahead and see betrayal, mockery, torture, and death, and still choose to walk forward. This was the night he felt alone, utterly alone, and not because the Father had left him, but because the weight of the world's sin began to press onto him, and the silence of heaven felt louder than ever. And yet, even in that silence, he trusted, he stayed, he rose from the ground and walked back to his friends, still asleep, and said, "The hour has come." Before we continue, if this moment speaks to something deep inside you, if you've ever felt crushed, alone, unheard, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You're not alone in your Gethsemane. And someone else may need this reminder that even Jesus wept, even Jesus wrestled, even Jesus stayed. The story of that night doesn't end in the garden. From Gethsemane, Jesus is led away, not by force, but by choice. He allows himself to be arrested. The soldiers come with torches, with weapons, with fear, and Jesus steps forward and says, "I am he." No resistance, no anger, just quiet authority wrapped in surrender. But that surrender didn't mean it didn't hurt. He was betrayed with a kiss. He was deserted by his closest followers. He stood trial while lies were spoken against him, and he remained silent. Not because he didn't have words, but because truth doesn't need to shout to remain true. Every moment after the garden was agony, physical, emotional, spiritual. And yet it was also the clearest revelation of love the world had ever seen. That night, Jesus showed us what it means to be fully God and fully man. He could have called down legions of angels. He could have undone the world with a word, but he chose to stay in the story. He chose to be misunderstood. He chose to be mocked, struck, and spit upon, because love demanded that he not run from suffering, but enter it. Every blow, every insult, every moment of silence was not a loss of power. It was the revelation of what power truly is. Restraint in the name of redemption. And still, he kept walking. Through courts, through denial, through injustice, he bore it all. Not just for the sake of obedience, but because he saw you. In Gethsemane, he saw you. In the betrayal, he saw you. In the trial, he saw you. And he said, yes. Yes to the pain. Yes to the loneliness. Yes to the cup he asked to pass. Because passing it meant passing over you. And he couldn't do that. The night Jesus was human is not a story of defeat. It's a portrait of a Saviour who knows every ache of the human heart. Have you ever felt abandoned? So did he. Have you ever wept alone at night, wondering if anyone understands? So did he. Have you ever asked God to take something away and heard nothing in return? So did he. And yet he stayed faithful. He chose the will of the Father, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. That's what makes this story so sacred. Not just that he died for us, but that he chose to feel everything we feel and still moved forward in love. This is the Jesus who knows your fear, your sorrow, your betrayal. This is the Jesus who meets you in your Gethsemane and says, I've been here and I didn't run. There's power in that. Not just divine power, but human courage. He didn't numb himself. He didn't escape it. He faced the night fully awake to its pain. And because he did, he can carry you through yours. The night Jesus was human was the night he proved just how far love will go. To kneel in agony, to sweat blood, to say yes when everything inside screamed no. So when your night feels too long, too dark, too heavy, remember him. Remember the garden. Remember the trembling hands that still opened wide in surrender. Remember the silence that held a deeper promise than words. He stayed so you could know you're never alone in your suffering. The story of that night was never about despair. It was about devotion. It was the turning point where divinity embraced frailty and hope began to rise, not in sunlight, but in sweat and silence. We often look for God in victory, in miracles, in resurrection. But what if he's just as present in the waiting, in the garden, in the unanswered prayer, in the tears no one else sees? The night Jesus was human teaches us that faith is forged not only in triumph, but in the valley of choice. The choice to keep going when nothing makes sense. The choice to trust when the sky is silent. The choice to surrender, not because it's safe, but because it's sacred. Jesus made that choice. And because he did, you can too. You can face your Gethsemane and not be ashamed. You can cry out and not feel weak. You can wrestle and still be held. Because he didn't wait for the morning to begin the miracle. It started in the dark. With a prayer, with a trembling voice, with a heart willing to break. He became like us so we could become like him. So let that night remind you, when you're at the end of your strength, you are standing where Jesus once knelt. And in that place, something holy happens. Not the removal of pain, but the arrival of purpose. And that purpose will carry you every step, every night, every time you whisper, your will, not mine. Let's not rush past that night. Let's sit with it. Let it speak to the parts of us we often hide. The moments we pretend to be stronger than we feel. The prayers we whisper through gritted teeth. The questions we're too afraid to ask. Because if Jesus, God in flesh, could weep and wrestle and wonder in the garden, then so can we. And more than that, we can be assured we're not forsaken when we do. He meets us there, in the ache, in the dark, in the echo of unanswered prayers. He kneels beside us, not to fix everything instantly, but to remind us that even this has meaning, that even this is seen, and that somehow, even here, we are loved. The night Jesus was human wasn't the end of hope. It was the beginning of redemption. So tonight, wherever you are, whether in joy or sorrow, in certainty or confusion, know this. You are not walking alone. You are walking with the one who stayed when it hurt, who chose you when it cost everything, who said yes in the garden so you could say yes in your pain too, and that yes will never go unheard. Not in heaven, not in history, not in your story, because love never sleeps And grace never forgets, especially not in the night. So let the silence of Gethsemane steady you. Let his tears become your reminder that your sorrow is not foreign to heaven. Let his trembling hands tell you that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. And let his yes become your strength when all you want to do is run. Because that night, the most divine thing Jesus did was stay human. And because he did, you now have a Saviour who understands. Not in theory, not from a distance, but intimately, tenderly, completely. He wore our skin. He carried our grief. He embraced our frailty. And in doing so, he changed the night forever. So now, even in your darkest hour, hope remains, because the one who wept in Gethsemane still walks through gardens of sorrow today, whispering, "You're not alone." And that changes everything. The night Jesus was human is not a distant memory. It's a present invitation to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be still, and to know that even when the night feels endless, he is there. Not always with answers, but always with presence. And sometimes that's more than enough. Because when God stayed in the garden, he proved that no part of our story is too dark to be shared with him, even the night, especially the night.